This is Rob Lowry, CFO of MGT Capital Investments, Inc. Good afternoon and welcome to MGT's first quarter 2018 investor call update. Joining me on the call is Robert Ladd, our President and Chief Executive Officer, and Grace Livingston, our Vice President of Communications. Steve Schaefer was unable to join the call due to unanticipated travel conflict. The agenda for today's call is for Mr. Ladd to give an overview of the company, the status of its cryptocurrency business to date. I will then follow with financial highlights of the company's operating results for the first 3 months of the year, followed by my presentation. Grace will lead the Q&A session before concluding the call. Prior to starting the call, I'd like to state the following forward-looking information. All information set forth in this investor update call, except historical and factual information, represents forward-looking statements. This includes all statements about the company's plans, benefits, estimates, and expectations. These statements are based on current estimates and projections, which involve certain risks and uncertainties that could cause actual results to differ materially from those in the forward-looking statements. Call participants are cautioned not to place undue reliance on these forward-looking statements, which reflect management's analysis only as of the date hereof. The company undertakes no obligation to publicly revise these forward-looking statements to reflect events or circumstances that arise after the date hereof. Call participants should carefully review the risks and uncertainties described in other documents that the company files from time to time with the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, included in our annual report on Form 10-K, quarterly reports on Form 10-Q, and disclosures in Form 8-K for a complete description of forward-looking statements and risk factors faced by our business. With that said, I will now turn the call over to Mr. Ladd for an overview of the company.
Thank you, Rob. So we have characterized the first quarter as a transition quarter as we physically moved operations and tons of equipment halfway around the globe. We were further challenged in the quarter by increased mining difficulty rates as well as a decline in the price of Bitcoin. The good news is that we are a debt-free, asset-rich company with about 7,000 S9 Antminers and 10 megawatts of available electricity. The electricity is a scarce commodity these days, and to have ample electricity is a big benefit. The bad news is that we continue to face logistical hurdles with respect to infrastructure, hardware, and improvements. These hurdles take more time to solve in Sweden than in the US and are the cause of our slow rollout. As of today, we are operating at about 1/3 of our theoretical capacity in Sweden, and we will accelerate that as fast as possible. Rather than promise dates, however, only to miss, we would like to assure stockholders that we are definitely moving forward. It's in our self-interest, everyone's self-interest, to move as fast as prudent, and many things, unfortunately, are out of our control with respect to shipments, customs, labor, rates. So the good news is that none of the hurdles are insurmountable. And we have the debt-free balance sheet that ensures our financial wherewithal. I know we'll get 100 questions. I think the only comment we should make with respect to timeline would be we're talking about weeks, not days, and also not months. I think with that, I will turn it over to Rob Lowry, our CFO.
Okay, thanks, Rob. What I'll do here is talk about the financial highlights of our first quarter of 2018. Our revenue, which is derived from our Bitcoin mining operations was $1 million for the first quarter of 2018 compared to $312,000 in the same period in the prior year, and $1.8 million for the fourth quarter of 2017. As we previously disclosed, what Rob just said, the company transitioned the vast majority of its mining operations from Sweden to Sweden from Washington State beginning in late December of 2017, and as a result had lower Bitcoin production. In addition, the sharp decline in the price of Bitcoin, with difficulty remaining high, compounded the sequential decline of our revenue. Operating expenses for the quarter were $5.2 million compared to $3.3 million in the first quarter of 2017. Operating expenses are primarily comprised of general administrative expenses, which include home office expenses, employee-related expenses, and non-cash stock-based compensation. The $1.9 million increase in operating expenses over the prior year was primarily due to three factors. One was an increase in cost of revenues of almost $700,000, resulting from the increase in our Bitcoin mining operations as compared to the first quarter of 2017. Second item contributing to the increase was $928,000 of non-cash stock-based compensation resulting from stock issued to consultants, employees, and directors for services rendered. The company did not issue stock to third-party consultants during the first quarter of 2017, as the company's registration statement on Form S-8 did not become effective until May of 2017. The third primary increase in the operating expenses over the prior year was about $500,000 in payroll-related, and recruiting expenses over the same period in the prior year. Steve Schaefer and Rob Lowry were hired. Steve was hired in August of 17, and I was hired in March of 18. Therefore, the prior quarter, or the first quarter in 2017, did not have our costs in that quarter. Non-operating expenses for the first quarter of 18 were $313,000 compared to $2.9 million in the same period in 2017. The net loss for the quarter was $4.5 million compared to $5.9 million in the first quarter of 2017, representing a $1.4 million decrease period over period. During the quarter, we purchased additional mining machines for approximately $7 million in cash and prepaid about $1 million in electricity and hosting fees. MGT ended the quarter with approximately $500,000 in cash, and as Rob Ladd said, we are debt-free. That concludes my remarks for the third quarter operating results, and I'll turn it over to Grace Livingston for Q&A.
Thank you, Rob. So I'd like to begin by taking questions and let you guys know that unfortunately we had planned on taking live questions but are unable to do so at this time. So we'll do our best to get to all the questions that we did receive via email in the time allotted. I will begin with the questions that we received from Mr. Dan, and this is in reference to Dragon Mint. So what we have is, let me start out here. Number one, do the cost of the new Dragon Mint miners compare favorably with S9s? And have you opened channels to inquire about purchasing the same? And has How Long stated to you when they anticipated to be able to begin supply? And at the risk of alienating Bitmain, do you feel the switch would be advantageous to MGTI? So I'm going to direct that towards Robert Ladd. Would you like to answer those questions for Mr. Dan?
Yes, I will. Am I on mute, or can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
So I think the general comment is we, like any manufacturer, would love to have multiple sources of supply. You hate to be beholden to one company. That being said, despite all the announcements, most miners that have come out or that have been speculated about or pre-orderable are in the same category as vaporware in most cases. There's nothing on the market right now that is an economic alternative to an S9. And if there is, we'll be in the position to acquire same. Most importantly, I think it would put Bitmain under some price umbrella so that they are not able to control the market the way they have in the past. But again, we're happy with the Bitmain machines, and but wide open as far as looking.
Okay, thank you. Next question we have is from Peter. What are your plans for future expansion? And okay, you've already answered those going on from the previous question. So what are your plans for future expansion?
Just by the way, most of the user reviews you see on the Dragon Mint, and as far as being more efficient at what they do, it's really not the case, particularly when you compare it to the cost. So with respect to future expansion, I think answer it humbly by saying we want to ensure investors that we get the 7,000 machines that we own up and running at full capacity. It's not to say we're not looking constantly at future expansion, particularly finding power at a good price where the weather is suitable. And I could go on and on about the future expansion plans and number of machines, but frankly, we want to see and report to you that at the same time as we have future plans, that our present plans have been executed.
All right, thank you. Next question we have is, why did you move so many miners to Sweden, even though you said that shipping was not worth it? At that time, Bitcoin was at a super high price. Due to the transfer, machines stayed idle and we may have lost revenue. Why was this decision taken?
So I'm not sure exactly which of Steve's tweets is being potentially mischaracterized. This very simple reason is that we had no power available in Washington. Two of the counties basically shut down new applications for power. Our contracted power with who we thought was going to provide the electricity was probably 6 months behind schedule. So the decision was made to go where we expected to be able to plug in the machines faster. So it was not really a case of taking existing operating miners out of service and moving them. We were literally moving boxes of machines.
Okay. And next question is, when will the remaining 3,800 rigs be online? Why is this taking so long, and what's wrong with the Sweden facility?
So I think reiterate what I said as far as the timeline. I would measure it in weeks, but not days and not months. I could give you 600 reasons why it's taking so long, from fans that come in with chip bleeds or stress fractures, or the utility guy getting sick and not coming in, but that doesn't matter. I mean, we have to execute. We do have to rely on other people, but there's nothing fundamentally wrong with the Sweden facility. The Sweden facility can support at least triple what we have, both in terms of size and power. I mean, the size of the facility is power. the environment, financial, political environment in Sweden is favorable. So we don't see there's fundamental problems with Sweden in general or our facility in particular.
Okay. Next question comes from Keith. Understand the decision to shift to the Sweden-based operations due to the power delivery issues. Are there plans underway to expand operations further in the U.S., or is the environment too crowded at this point?
I would say, again, not to talk too directly on growth until we show you our current operations up to what we do have. I think we can see opportunities that others can't. Number one, the mining business is getting more and more concentrated, higher barriers to entry, bigger companies that have capital and know-how are going to be the ones who can grow. By being in Sweden, that presence has helped us identify several other locations which we think have comparable economics. As I mentioned, there are some U.S. locations we're looking at that maybe were prior lumber mills or something like that have a lot of power at the site, but might require some level of work. So again, I don't want to comment too much on the future other than a general comment. And despite as badly as we're all waiting day by day, week by week, our view, and I think the view of our stockholders, should be we're in the second or third inning of Bitcoin. And if we were in the ninth inning or the eighth and we had this delay, I would feel much differently than I do now. While it's painful, the delay, I know the opportunities ahead will be a lot greater.
All right, thank you. Our next question comes from Jesse. How many S9s are currently in operation in total petahash? What kind of time frame are we looking at for the rest of our S9s operational? And are we planning on mining more Ethereum or Bitcoin Cash anytime in the near future?
What do they say in a lawsuit or a legal trial? Asked and answered. I think, yes, we are operating at about 1/3 of our capacity. As far as Ethereum, Bitcoin Cash, we definitely we monitor the Bitcoin Cash versus Bitcoin equation all the time because we can use the same machines. Ethereum, not super profitable right now at all, although more flexible in terms of the machines being able to mine different coins. We have not made any decision to increase Ethereum past the 50 GPU rigs that we have, though.
All right. I can see that's a very popular question, so we'll refrain from asking that question again. This question comes in from Chris. Can you clarify what the term hosting provider means and what goods and services MGT receives from those providers?
So basically, at least what we call a hosting provider would be a landlord, if you will, that rents a space in their building or their entire building in our case, that provides power, temperature control, ventilation, security, manpower on site for rebooting or repairs. So it's more than just the electricity. And in fact, the landlords, in most jurisdictions, companies can't just resell electricity. So we're actually renting a space that happens to have a lot of electricity.
Okay. And another question from Chris is, how many Bitcoins were mined in the month of April?
Don't know if we have that exact number right now, but we can. We haven't decided, frankly, whether we're going to report monthly the way Riot has started to do. Quarterly reporting is there for a reason, to keep investors apprised, but, not getting into the gyrations of every day or every week. But, that being said, I think we'll be able to get back to you with that exact number for April.
Okay. Our next question comes from Jack. Is another 15,000 rigs in Sweden still the goal by the end of this year?
Yes, that's what we'd like to fill the building that we have by the end of the year. So I think that's maybe a little high. It might be 12 or 13,000 that fit, but that's roughly the goal.
Okay. Shifting gears just a little bit here. Next question that comes in, is Sentinel being used by MGTCI operations at all?
No.
Okay. Next question, is the security phone business still in place? Heard in some interview of McAfee that there will be a release in 6 months by MGT?
Specifically, no. However, in the separation from McAfee, MGT has retained rights or certain property and IP rights to any cell phone that McAfee might develop. And this is John McAfee, of course, not McAfee Antivirus. So in the event that John finds others to produce his phone and release his phone, our participation would be merely as a royalty collector. But we have no deal in place, nor any reason to know at this moment, aside from what everyone else has heard, that there is a phone imminent. I think on that same topic, while we all love John, as most everyone knows, Mr. McAfee does not speak for our company in any capacity.
Okay. We have another question from Chris. It says, does MGT still have an active cryptocurrency advisory board?
No, and I believe the website page had been taken down. That board, as well as the crypto board, were, I want to call them friends of McAfee, that early on had decided to serve, while illustrious names, there really wasn't much that we took advantage of, nor that we could really do with them, given all the different factions in Bitcoin.
Okay. Next question we have is, what is the plan for uplisting? Seeing no news on that, does it need at least the $4 price maintained for a certain period to uplist?
So we are in the process of applying for uplisting. We believe the $4 price is the price we need, and that's not a certain period, but it's kind of an instant price. There are some exceptions at $2 and $3 that we may or may not fit into. However, if we do need the $4 price, and as everyone hates the word, but if a reverse split is required to get there for that reason of uplisting, then we feel that the negative perception of a reverse split is overcome by that reason. But uplisting remains a top priority for us.
Okay. The next question is, do you have a marketing plan? The company has zero name brand recognition and poor public marketing. Something needs to be done. Investors should not have to wait for updates.
Well, I'm not sure exactly what that means. However, we do and will spend money on brand recognition and all the things you say. Potentially in uplisting, we should or will come with a new name and ticker symbol, things like that. Just very basic things. However, don't want to understate results versus flashy brand name. Again, our goal right now is 100% to get our machines up and running, and when we have something very good to say, then the cost of the brand strategy would make more sense.
Okay, we only have time for, let's see, probably about 2 more questions. So I'm actually going to direct the next 2 questions to Mr. Lowry. This question comes in from Mr. Chris. Why is MGT using shares today to pay for goods and services rather than debt, which can be paid for later with the sale of stock at higher prices, as was done in December 2017?
Okay, management's plan is to increase its cryptocurrency operation and increase cash flow to pay for operating expenses. As Rob has indicated, given the operational delay, management had to use its shares to pay for goods and services, and as opposed to issuing convertible debt, given the volatility of our stock price and the volatility of the stock price, although the stock price was high in December, it's unpredictable, as we know, and it could be more expensive.
What kind of consulting services were paid with the $800,000 in stock in Q1?
Yes, as disclosed in Q1. You can put those into 3 or 4 buckets. The consulting services were primarily comprised of business development services relating to securing the company's management agreements and other business development opportunities. Bucket number 1. Bucket number 2, marketing, communication, social media consulting, and website maintenance. And then number 3, finance and accounting support.
All right. Thank you so much, gentlemen. I will now turn it back to Mr. Lowry so that he can conclude this quarterly earnings report.
All right. Thanks, Grace, and thanks, Rob.
But I'll interrupt for 1 second. It's Rob Ladd. There was one other question regarding, and I know that certain investors have asked regarding our $800,000 per month lease, which was for the space in Sweden, which would have included 15 megawatts. So I think, just as a general point, people should know that we're not paying for electricity we don't use. So I just want to bring that out, not getting too specific, but I know I've gotten several calls from people saying, what's this $800 a month you're paying? And again, that's theoretical on full production.
Would you like to add anything else?
No, I think that's a great point, Rob, because someone could pick up and ask that question based on what's disclosed in the 10Q. So thank you for that. So this concludes our prepared comments for MGT first quarter 2018 investor call update. Thank you to all participants that dialed in and to those that presented questions. We appreciate your continued support and have a good afternoon.